The air in the Miller family bakery smelled of fresh sourdough and beechwood smoke. It was the safest place in the world, yet to 20-year-old Isolde it felt like a cage. Her father, a sturdy man with a face perpetually dusted in flour, was pulling the first batch of bread from the oven. Her mother stood by the window, tying knots in pastry bags while humming an old folk song. They were good people, simple, kind, and completely unaware that their daughter carried a force within her that could turn this bakery to ash in a single breath. Isolde kneaded the dough on the workbench. Every movement was mechanical, but her mind was elsewhere. She felt a tingling in her palms. The magic inside her was like a wild animal trying to claw its way out. Whenever her mood shifted, objects around her tended to tremble. She had to constantly check herself. "Be like them," she repeated in her mind. "Be ordinary. Be silent." At that moment, the bakery doors burst open, letting in a gust of cold morning air. A patrol entered. 2 men in leather coats wearing the insignias of Lord Malakor. Their presence was like a bucket of ice water. In a world where magic meant only cruelty and oppression, these men were messengers of fear. "Millers," one of them barked. "Double tithe for the citadel. The Lord needs supplies for his legions." Isolde's father bowed his head. "But, sir, if we give that much, there will be nothing left for the village. The people will starve." The soldier merely offered a cold smile and, with a gloved hand, swept the fresh loaves onto the dirty floor. Isolde felt anger surge in her chest. That wasn't just dough on the ground, it was her parents' work, their love, and their sweat. She felt her fingertips grow hot. A glass of milk on the shelf began to shake dangerously. She quickly hid her hands under her apron and bit her lip until she tasted blood. She had to smother the fire within. She saw images in her memory, stories heard from travelers, witches who joined the Lord, burning villages for sport. She didn't want to be like them. She wanted to remain the baker's daughter, with clean hands. The soldiers eventually left with a wagon full of food. A heavy silence settled over the bakery. Her mother silently began picking up the soiled loaves, and her father sighed as if 10 years had been added to his back. "One day it will change, Isolde," her father said softly, stroking her hair. "Goodness always returns. We just have to endure." Isolde forced a smile, but deep down she knew that enduring wouldn't be enough. She stepped into the back alley to catch her breath. She looked toward the horizon, where the dark spire of Malakor's citadel loomed above the clouds. She felt the powerful black magic radiating from there, and in contrast she felt her own, pure, white, and hungry. It was a storm just waiting for the first strike of lightning. And that lightning was coming sooner than Isolde could ever imagine. Afternoons in Valeria were usually quiet. The sun leaned lazily against the rooftops and the air shimmered with heat. Isolde and her 12-year-old brother Thomas were tasked with gathering firewood for the evening bake. Thomas was the polar opposite of his sister. He was like Mercury. constantly in motion, his mouth full of tallies about knights and dragons. "Look, Isolde!" Thomas shouted, jumping onto an old half-uprooted oak leaning over the ravine by the creek. "I am the king of the forest. No one can defeat me." Isolde smiled, but she felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach. The tree looked unstable. Its roots were exposed and dry. "Thomas, get down, please." "The wood is rotten," she called out, gathering dry branches into her basket. The scent of pine needles and damp earth usually calmed her, but today the magic in her veins felt restless, as if warning her of a storm that wasn't visible in the sky. It happened in a heartbeat. A deep, guttural crack echoed through the woods. The old oak, under the weight of Thomas's jump, finally lost its battle with time. The boy screamed, his foot caught in a splintering gap, and the trunk plummeted down the slope with a deafening roar. Thomas didn't fall alone. A massive branch pinned him to the ground at the bottom of the ravine. Isolde dropped her basket and ran down so fast she tore her skirts on the thorns. When she reached him, the world stopped. Thomas lay in an unnatural position, his face white as a sheet, and a thick, dark stream of blood flowed from his chest. A branch had pierced his lung. His breath was nothing more than a faint, bubbling wheeze. "Thomas! No, no, no!" Isolde sobbed, trying in vain to lift the heavy trunk. She smelled iron and death. Her brother, her only light in this dark world, was fading away. In that moment it happened. The dam Isolde had spent years building inside herself broke. She no longer cared if anyone saw her. She no longer cared if magic was evil. She only wanted Thomas to breathe again. She placed her palms on his blood-stained chest. Her body went taut like a bowstring. A white light began to pour from her fingers. It wasn't cold. It glowed with the heat of the midday sun. The light began to soak into Thomas's wound. Isolde felt her own life force flowing into her brother. She watched as the torn skin knit back together, as the bones snapped back into place, and as the blood turned from dark to a vibrant, healthy red. Thomas breathed in with a jolt and opened his eyes. "Isolde?" he whispered, confused. The wound was gone. Only clear skin and a torn shirt remained. Isolde collapsed beside him, exhausted and trembling. "You're okay. Thank God you're okay," she repeated, clutching him to her. But in that moment, the hair on the back of her neck stood up. She felt they were not alone. Slowly, she turned her head toward the thick brush above the ravine. There, in the shadows between the trees, stood Father Fabiano. His black cassock looked like a shadow of death itself in the woods. His hands clutched a rosary, but his gaze was not merciful. His eyes were wide with horror and disgust. He had seen everything, the celestial light, the miracle that in his eyes only the devil could perform. Fabiano didn't say a word. He turned and began to run back toward the village. Isolde looked at her hands, which were still faintly glowing. She knew what it meant. The miracle that saved her brother's life had just destroyed her own. The curse had been cast, and the silence of the bakery was lost forever. News of the miracle in the woods traveled faster than an autumn wind. Before Isolde and Thomas could even reach home, an unnatural silence had fallen over the village. People who used to smile at them now shuttered their windows and crossed themselves as Isolde passed by. At the bakery, her parents weren't waiting with scoldings, but with a look of fear in their eyes that was worse than any punishment. Her father was already packing a small bundle of food. "You must go, Isolde," he said, his voice trembling. "Father Fabiano sent a messenger to the citadel. It's not just soldiers coming for you. It's them." Isolde wanted to argue, to say she had only saved her brother, but the words caught in her throat. In the distance, the thundering of hooves echoed. It wasn't the gallop of ordinary horses. It was heavy, accompanied by a metallic grinding. The Black Guard had arrived in Valeria, an elite unit of mages and hunters serving Lord Malakor himself. "Isolde Miller," a voice thundered, sounding as if it rose directly from the earth, "come forth in the name of the Sovereign. Your blood belongs to the crown." The bakery doors burst open under the pressure of an invisible force. A man in a long black cloak entered, his face hidden by a mouthless silver mask. Smoke that smelled of sulphur swirled around him. He was a shadow mage, one of those who had haunted Isolde's nightmares since childhood. "Don't touch her," her father cried, standing before Isolde with a bread peel in his hand. The mage merely moved a finger lazily. An invisible wave of energy flung her father against the wall where he slumped, motionless. Her mother screamed and rushed to his side. Isolde felt everything inside her break. The anger she had suppressed her whole life clawed its way to the surface. Her palms began to glow faintly, but the mage only gave a mocking laugh. "Your light is mere prey in this world, girl. At the Academy of Shadows we will teach you how to tame it, or we will squeeze it out of you to the last drop." "I'm not going anywhere," Isolde hissed. "That wasn't a question," the mage replied, reaching out a hand from which black tendrils of magic began to sprout. At that moment an arrow with a flaming tip streaked through the window, thudding into the wooden table. The bakery began to fill with thick, acrid smoke that seemed to weaken the shadow magic. In the chaos, a figure in a tattered grey cloak appeared at the back entrance, wearing a mask that resembled the face of a wolf. "If you want to live, come with me," the stranger shouted. Isolde took one last look at her parents and her brother, who was cowering in the corner. She saw pain in their eyes, but also a silent plea. "Run!" Her heart wrenched as she ran out into the dark night, away from everything she loved. They raced through gardens and narrow alleys, while behind them the bakery was swallowed by the flames of Malakor's guard. For the first time in her life, Isolde was leaving home not as a baker, but as hunted prey. But deep in her soul, for the first time, she felt that her magic no longer just wanted to heal. It wanted to fight. Her mysterious savior led her deep into the Black Woods, a place where even Malakor's hunters dared not venture without an entire army at their backs. When the stranger removed his wolf mask, Isolde saw a face scarred by battle, but possessed of kind eyes. His name was Elias. captain of the Unbound, a resistance of ordinary people who refused to live in a cage built of black magic. Your parents knew this day would come, Elias said by a small fire in the cave. They knew your light was too bright to remain hidden in a baker's oven. Isolde stared into the flames, feeling hollow. Everything she knew had turned to ash. I never wanted this power. I just want the world to be normal again. The world will never be normal as long as Malakor stands, Elias replied firmly. And you are the only one who can truly hurt him. Not by healing, but by taking away what makes him a god. The opportunity came sooner than Isolde could doubt herself. Scouts brought word that a supply wagon, protected by Archmage Valerius, was heading toward a nearby pass. The Unbound decided to ambush them. Isolde went with them. The attack was lightning fast. The resistance musketeers fired a volley from cover, but Valerius was no ordinary soldier. He leapt from the carriage, and an impenetrable sphere of purple lightning formed around him. Bullets simply evaporated against it. "Puny worms!" Valerius screamed, his voice shredding eardrums. He raised his hands, and spheres of liquid fire began to rain from the sky. One of the resistance soldiers fell, consumed by flames. Isolde couldn't take it anymore. She ran from cover, heading straight for the mage. "Isolde, no, get back," Elias shouted, but it was too late. Valerius turned to her with a triumphant sneer. "There you are, baker's daughter. The Sovereign has promised mountains of gold for your head." He pointed a finger at her, unleashing a torrent of pure, destructive, dark essence. Instinctively, Isolde thrust her hands forward. She expected pain, death, the end, but instead she felt a hunger. Her body didn't react like a shield. It reacted like a bottomless well. The moment the dark stream touched her palms, the white glow of her skin turned into a blinding silver. The magic didn't enter her to destroy her. She was drinking it. Valerius's eyes went wide. He felt his power draining from his fingers, his arms, his very soul. He tried to pull his hand away, but he was tethered by an invisible bond. His purple lightning faded until it vanished completely. The Archmage, who a second ago commanded the elements, now shook like a leaf. His skin grayed and wrinkled as Isolde siphoned every drop of his supernatural might. When Isolde finally lowered her hands, Valerius collapsed like an empty shell. He wasn't dead, but he was now just an ordinary, frail old man without a spark of magic left. Isolde stood in the middle of the battlefield. She felt impossibly strong. She saw more sharply. She could hear the heartbeats of everyone around her. Valerius's magic boiled inside her like hot wine. The resistance soldiers looked up at her with sacred awe. Elias walked toward her slowly and sank to one knee. "You don't give the power back," he whispered. "You take it. You are the one we've been waiting for." Isolde looked at her hands. They weren't just white with flour anymore. They were the hands of someone who had just changed the rules of the world. She knew this was only the beginning, and that the more evil she consumed, the less of the old Isolde would remain. Word of the shadow thief spread like wildfire through dry reeds. Under Isolde's leadership, the unbound resistance transformed from a handful of partisans into an unstoppable army of the people. They marched through the countryside, and wherever they appeared, miracles followed. Isolde was no longer just a warrior. She had become salvation. In remote villages, where people were dying from curses cast by Malakor's tax collectors, Isolde would simply walk down the street, and the darkness would vanish. We saw her kneeling in the mud beside an old woman afflicted by the black rot, a magical plague. Isolde placed a hand on her forehead, and we watched as black smoke rose from the woman's skin and vanished into Isolde's palms. The woman drew a breath, color returning to her cheeks. But Isolde's face hardened for a moment, her eyes turning pitch black for a second, before she quelled the absorbed darkness within. The people began to call her the Chosen One. In one of the larger settlements, hundreds awaited them. It wasn't weapons they held in their hands, but flowers and scraps of precious food. A little girl, no older than Thomas, approached her and handed her an apple. "Are you the good sorceress?" she asked softly. Isolde knelt and stroked her hair. "I'm just Isolde, little one. But I promise you, you won't have to be afraid of the dark anymore." Ilias, who accompanied her like a shadow, noticed things others did not. Isolde ate less and less. She slept only a few hours. The power she took from defeated mages boiled inside her. She was growing taller. Her voice had a depth that made the air vibrate, and her movements were almost preternaturally graceful. Isolde Elias said to her one evening by the campfire, "That power, it's changing you. Don't forget the bakery. Don't forget the smell of bread." Isolde looked at him, and for a heartbeat her gaze was foreign cold as the stars. Then she blinked, and tears welled in her eyes. "I feel them all, Elias, all the mages I've consumed. Their rage, their pride, they fight inside me. But then I see these people offering me shelter in their wretched huts, sharing their last crust of bread, and that keeps me grounded. It's them who make me good, not my power." But Malakor's tyranny would not crumble so easily. The sovereign in the citadel felt his grip slipping with every mage Isolde stripped of their strength. At the borders of the capital, he began to gather his most terrifying army beings that were no longer human, but pure, concentrated agony. The path of the Chosen now led directly into the jaws of the beast, toward the gates of the Citadel of Shadows, where the future of the world was to be decided. Isolde knew that to defeat the ultimate evil, she might have to become something that could never again be called the baker's daughter. The Citadel of Shadows towered over the land like a black finger pointing toward a sky that had long forgotten the stars. Thousands gathered beneath its ramparts, peasants with scythes, deserting musketeers, and in their midst Isolde. She was no longer the girl who feared her own shadow. She was a living storm. Tonight she spoke to them, her voice carrying through the air effortlessly. As if born by magic itself, we will no longer be just bakers, blacksmiths, and farmers. Tonight we will be the hammer that shatters Malakor's throne. A roar that shook the earth was her answer, but Malakor did not respond with words. The gates of the citadel groaned open with a terrifying screech. And from them poured the army of oblivion, faceless beings composed of nothing but smoke and malice, armed with blades that drank not blood, but the very soul. "Fire!" Elias shouted. A volley of musket fire tore through the air, but the lead passed through these creatures uselessly. Despair began to gnaw at the ranks of the resistance. Men fell, their bodies left grey and hollow. Isolde saw her friends collapsing. She saw Ilias fighting 3 shadows at once, his sword slashing in vain through the darkness. She felt their fear, and the sensation hurt more than any physical wound. "Enough!" she screamed. She sprinted forward, straight into the heart of the shadow army. She stopped, closed her eyes, and reached deep within to the place where all the magic she had ever consumed was stored. She felt Valerius's rage, the pride of the shadow mages, and the pure light of her own soul. She fused them all into a single blinding point. When she opened her eyes, there were 2 pillars of pure silver fire. She threw her arms wide, and a shockwave of white light erupted from her body. It wasn't an attack, it was a hunger. The light coiled like tentacles around every shadow creature within 100 yards. The monsters began to shriek, a sound that shredded the ears. Isolde wasn't just draining their magic. She was draining their very existence. Within seconds, the army of oblivion dissolved into nothingness, and Isolde stood there, glowing so brightly that the soldiers had to shield their eyes. "The path is open," Elias roared, stunned by what he had just witnessed. The resistance surged forward, through the open gates and into the heart of darkness. But Isolde felt that the most important trial was yet to come. High above, in the tallest tower, Malakor was waiting for her. She felt his gaze, and it wasn't fear radiating from him. It was curiosity. "Come to me, my dear little thief," a voice whispered in her head. "Come and take what is rightfully yours." Isolde began to climb the stairs of the citadel. Every step felt heavier. The magic boiled within her so fiercely that glowing cracks began to appear beneath her skin. She knew that if she consumed Malakor, there might not be enough room left for Isolde Miller. But she also knew that if she didn't, the world would never see another sunrise. The final doors of the citadel were made neither of iron nor wood. They were woven from oblivion. As Isolde stepped through them, the roar of the battle below in the courtyard suddenly fell silent. She found herself in a hall where neither time nor space held sway. At the end of this void stood him, Sovereign Malakor. There was nothing human left of him. His body was a shroud woven from astral darkness, and his face was a mask of bleached bone. "Welcome, little baker," he whispered, his voice sounding like the grinding of glaciers. "I look at you and see the most beautiful vessel the world has ever fashioned. So much stolen power. And yet you still try to hold it together with your pathetic human will." "I didn't come here to talk, Malakor," Isolde said. Her voice was no longer that of a girl from Valaria. It was a choir of thousands of souls she had consumed. "I came to take back everything you stole from this world." Malakor gave a low, hollow laugh. With a wave of his hand, spikes of black crystal erupted from the floor. Isolde didn't dodge. She simply walked through them, her aura shattering them into dust. A battle erupted, the likes of which the world had never seen. Malakor hurled entire galaxies of darkness, summoned the shadows of dead kings, and tore the very fabric of reality. Isolde answered with pure raw essence. The hall filled with blinding flashes of silver and black. Every impact of their forces shook the citadel's foundations so violently that houses in the foothills below crumbled. But Malakor was as old as the darkness itself. "You cannot drink me, girl," he roared, trapping Isolde in a cage of black energy. "I am the void, and the void cannot be consumed. It consumes you." Isolde felt her strength failing. Her body, that fragile shell of flesh and bone, began to give out. She felt light escaping from her eyes and mouth, light she could no longer control. In that moment, on the brink of absolute exhaustion, she closed her eyes. She remembered. She didn't remember magic, but the smell of freshly baked bread, the warmth of her father's hand, Thomas's laughter by the creek. She remembered the people who believed in her, not because she was powerful, but because she was one of them. That humanity, that small, ordinary thing, was the one weapon Malakor did not understand. "You're right," Isolde whispered, a tear appearing in her voice for the first time in a long while. "The void cannot be consumed, but it can be filled." Instead of trying to steal Malakor's power, she did the exact opposite. She opened her heart and let all that accumulated strength pour out, not as an attack, but as a sacrifice. She flooded the hall with light so pure and bright that even Malakor's darkness began to melt like snow in the spring. "What are you doing?" Malakor screamed, fear audible in his voice for the first time. "You'll destroy yourself. It will tear you apart." "That's okay," Isolde smiled. "I've already finished my task." An explosion followed that tore the clouds apart across the entire kingdom. Light erupted from the peak of the citadel like a new pillar of sun and spilled into every corner of the land. People in the farthest villages saw the shadows vanish, the sick hill and the sky turn blue for the first time in centuries. When the dust settled, the citadel was in ruins. At the top of a pile of stone sat Elias and Thomas. All they found was a torn piece of a linen apron and a single white rose blooming in a crack of black glass. Malakor was gone, but so was Isolde. People say that at night, when the sky is clearest, you can see a silver star that shines brighter than the rest. They call it the Star Baker. And in Valaria, in a small bakery rebuilt from white stone, bread is baked every morning that tastes like freedom. Isolde Miller is no longer the girl who feared the dark. She became the light that banished the darkness forever. Her story does not end with death, but with every new dawn that rises over this world.